Hello, class. My name is Joshua Rinda, and I will be covering Titus 2, verses 11 through 14 with you today. Um, I chose Titus 2 because I think Titus is one of my favorite books in the Bible and the way Paul addresses issues in the church. But before we jump into Titus 2, I'd like to cover the context of it so we get an idea of what's going on. Um, Titus was written by the Apostle Paul around 62 to 64 AD. This book was written to Titus. Now, why was this book written? This book, interestingly enough, has very little theological or defending of faith and doctrine type of a message in it. But what it does have is Paul specifically laying out instructions for what Titus needs to do in order to correct the church in certain ways. So what I would like to do is look up in Titus 2, verses 11 through 14, and I'm gonna go verse by verse to help us really understand what's going on here. So Titus 2:11, Titus 2:11 says, "For the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation for all people." In verse 1, this shows us that salvation is for everyone, not just for the Jew, not just for the Gentile, but for everyone. This would have been a huge fundamental truth that the early church would have been missing, especially from the Jew side. They would have not have seen this as being true. But salvation is for the Jew and to the Gentile. This was the beating heart of Paul's mission. We see over and over again that Paul's calling was for the Gentiles. We see him going out and proclaiming the message to the Gentiles, to the Jews as well, but he was specifically called in Acts 9:15 to go to the Gentiles and proclaim them the truth of God. In Titus 2:12, the next verse, we read, training us to renounce ungodliness and worldly passions, and to live self-controlled, upright, and godly in the present age. This verse, I think, specifically shows us that if we've tasted the sweetness of God's gospel, if we tasted the sweetness of the saving gospel that has saved us, then sanctification comes next. And that in order for us to come to know Christ, the next step after that is a call to obedience, a call to sanctification, a call to walk in holiness. And in verse 12, Paul reminds us that if we have been saved, if we have been truly saved, truly came to the full knowledge of Christ as Lord, then what will follow is a godly lifestyle. Now, an important note is this isn't part of the saving process. This is simply, if we have been saved, then this will follow. This has nothing to do with our saving action of God saving us. This is what comes after it. So Paul tells us that we are training us to renounce ungodliness in worldly passions and to live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in a present age. Titus 2:13 says, waiting for our blessed hope, the appointing of the glory of our great God and Savior Jesus Christ. Again, when Paul was in jail writing many of the letters, or when Paul was in deep distress, one thing he always relied on was knowing that Jesus was coming back to save those who he foreknew. Knowing that Jesus is coming back to save the ones who believe in him. I think this is a fundamental truth we can all hold to. We can all know that Jesus, no matter what we're going through, is on our side, but also that he's coming back again, and that this is not the best that's going to come. That this is only the present age that which we are living, but it's going to get better. Jesus is coming back, and when he does, we will be with him. That should be enough for us. That should be enough to help us to get through whatever we are going through. And lastly, in Titus 2:14, it says, who gave himself for us to redeem us from all lawlessness, and to purify for himself a people of his own possession, who are zealous for good works. Now this again separates that good works is not a part of salvation, but once we have been redeemed from lawlessness, once we have been picked out of the flock, if you want to say, once we have been saved, that living in sin is not supposed to happen, that we are supposed to be sanctified. Sanctification comes next. Knowing God separates us from the world. We should not like the things of the world. We should be away from the things that the world is passionate about. It clearly says, redeemed from all lawlessness, and to be purified for himself, a people of his own possession, who are zealous for good works. Um, I think this comes back into, are we zealous for good works? This is the simple application side. Are we zealous for good works? Is that something that we strive for? Not in a way that we have to earn our way in towards God in any way. No, it's all on our behalf. We've been saved by faith through grace, not by any works, by no means. Um, so have we? I think this echoes Romans 5:8, that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Christ did it all for us, and he did this so that we may be his people, not just some people, but his people. It shows that his possession, it's a personal action of Christ loving us more than just a normal, I guess, individual, but his own people. I think that shows a level of intimacy that we may forget when we read this. But this shows the great heart of the Apostle Paul in reaching the Gentiles. This shows that we are all, salvation is open to all. So in short, I have a few things I'd like to cover. First, the first thing this passage shows us is that we have been given grace as believers, and now that salvation is open to all people, not just to the Jew, but now to the Gentile as well. Second is that this means that we have to live in a life that reflects what we have been saved from. If we have been saved by grace through faith, and we have been saved from sin, then we should no longer live in sin. We are called to be out of that. Although we are sinful and we will fail, we are called to live a life that reflects Christ. And doing that is by denying sin, denying ourselves, picking up our cross, and following God on a daily basis. Thirdly, while doing this, we can rest in the hope that Jesus is coming back again. Lastly, this covers the first point. Jesus died for us who were helpless in sin and lawlessness, so that we can be called his people, set apart to live for his glory, while living zealous in good works. Not that work saves us, but by Jesus' selfless act on the cross is what saves us. We are saved by grace through faith alone. This message in Titus reflects that and screams that as loud as it can. We are saved from what God did for his glory, not our own, but for his glory. That is what I have gotten from Titus 2. I thank you for watching, and I hope you all have a blessed day. Thank you.